Hello. Welcome. That's right. We're going to zip, 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 zip. Hello. Woo. Day 2 of Queer Week. Thumbs up? Double thumbs up. I got some double thumbs up. I won't even talk about doing a wave because I know that's, unless anybody wants to, but I'm just not going to. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. My name is David Simpson. What? It's too hot. Let's do a just this without getting up. That was quite beautiful. That was quite beautiful. We're going to do some Tai Chi. Chair Chi. Chair Chi. I have a knack. Okay, here we are. My name is David Simpson, still. My pronouns are still he, him. I'm program director at the Fine Arts Work Center, still. My boss is here. Hopefully that's something that will continue. We have a great, yay, Sharon. Big hand for Sharon Poley, the executive director here, makes all of this possible. We have a great lineup for you tonight on this, our second of 3 faculty events this week. We're going to hear from poet Cameron Awkward Rich. Woo! We are going to hear from writer Alexander Chee. And we are going to hear from printmaker Miriam Klein Stahl. But before we get started, I know you're excited. I'll talk as little as possible, besides some really bad jokes. A couple of items of interest. I've noticed, and I'm very pleased, at the state of the sign-up sheet for Thursday night. There are a good last week this time, no sign-ups. You guys are putting last week to shame. Don't tell them. But you're doing great, but we can do better. So if you haven't signed up, I heartily encourage you to sign up. You will in no way be sorry. You were here last week. Was it not a great night? She's not a ringer. She's not paid. Life-changing. You heard it here, folks. So if you haven't signed up, we invite you to do so. Of course, it's totally voluntary. You can sign up until the very last second. Yeah, it's a great experience. You won't forget it in a good way. Sign-up sheet. Bernadine is a lovely part of the Falk family, and she is going to host a meditation session on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So you have to get permission from your teacher, but if you're down for it, she'll be meeting in here for a quick 20-minute meditation, and all of you are invited. If you have any questions, put your hand up or stand up even. Just ask Bernadine. And let's give a big hand for Bernadine for offering to do that. It's really nice. Emotional health, and that's good. It's good for us. This Friday, we're having our second summer salon of the season, and I think I heard a couple of gasps. Maybe that was just me. Anyway, summer salon number 2, featuring famed and wonderful children's book author Jacqueline Woodson, who's a former fellow. This Friday, there's going to be a reception and a wonderful conversation between her and our board member, Patrick Nolan. It's going to be really wonderful. She's fabulous. So you can find out more information on our website. Check it out. And if you're able to attend, I highly encourage you to do so. A heads up, as you may know, we're doing kind of a total revamp of our online offerings, and we're going to be launching that in August. This summer, we're going to do kind of a carry-on for design for all the writing students this summer. So if you're taking a writing workshop this summer, we're going to do a 4-week online workshop in August, facilitated by MP Carver, who is the facilitator of our submit-a-thons, if you've ever attended one of those. So to help you carry on the momentum of what you worked on this summer and to keep that energy going. So if you're a writing student here, you'll be getting an email later this week from Jennifer Jean, who's our Falk Online program manager, to give you all the details about how to sign up for that workshop. So if you want to keep the energy going from what you're doing this summer with your writing instructors, this is a great way to do it. Our presenters will be signing books in the back. after the faculty talk, and there are books by other faculty members this week in the back, and also this summer in our bookstore, and also there's a bookcase right by the corridor there. So check out all the books. We also have some great merch, as you know, so great. But there's a new edition. There's a new edition. If you'll turn around and look at Miracle back there, she's holding gasps. Our brand new, hot off the presses totes. Hey, what you got there? I have a Falk tote. Yep, it's very reasonably priced. Oh, and speaking of prices, you can come back every night. That's really. I'm doing this twice a night for 9 weeks. I'll be back at 9 o'clock. Speaking of prices, there's a special price for scholarship students. So if you're here with us as a Fox Scholar, please check out the merch in the back. You'll get a 30% off of anything that's merch related. So check it out. The gallery. If you haven't checked out our new summer exhibition that just went up a couple of weeks ago, I encourage you to do so. It's called To Move a Mountain, curated by past fellow Cody Brown and features work by former Fox Fellows. The proceeds of all work sold goes to support Fox programs, so please be sure to check it out if you haven't. And also I'd like to give a shout out to the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation who support our summer public programming. Restrooms are still down the hall, as far as I know. And finally, do us a favor. You don't want to be that person. What am I going to ask you to do now? Silence your phone. You guys are good. Okay, now I'd like to invite up one of Cameron's students, Kayla Figueroa, who's going to introduce Cameron Awkward Rich. Kayla, come on up.
Cameron Awkward Rich is a poet, scholar, and author of Sympathetic Little Monster, The Terrible We, Thinking with Trans Maladjustment, and Dispatch. His writing has appeared in Transgender Studies Quarterly, American Poetry Review, the Kenyon Review, the Paris Review, Poetry, and elsewhere. He earned his PhD from Stanford University and has been supported with fellowships from Cave Canem, the Lannan Foundation, Duke University, and the ACLS. Presently, he is an associate professor in women, gender, and sexuality studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. When I read Cameron Awkward Rich's work, I think of our ocular design. I see a questioning of our worldly definitions. I see a surgical exploration of transhood, blackness, queerness, sorrow, hope, and dreaming. I see an anchoring of our interconnectedness and what it means to exist in the first person plural. I see an exploration of the interior and exterior, the skin and the skeletal, and how we may use it to inform our protest in life. I see a study of the storms in and around us, and learning to seek when to seek refuge and when to look in its eye. As a writer, poet, and person in general, I don't necessarily believe in the linearity of time. I think time spirals above and below and in and around us. And I think there can be whiplash in revisiting the past, but when I read Cameron's work, I think, though it may be painful and scary, it is necessary. There's so much that can emerge and that we can learn when we give to ourselves and others, if we can create space and time and attention to open, not just for the sake of seeing, but to address and reimagine our narratives, understanding what bridges our humanity to ourselves, others, and what can pull us away. And in our workshop, I think we're doing that. After our first meeting, another classmate and I got lunch, and we talked about how alarmed we were at how comfortable we felt in that room. Personally, I felt at ease and encouraged to explore my thoughts, my feelings, my poetic thinking, which, as a Black lesbian, I haven't always felt in writing workshops that I've been. And I think that it's a testament to the energy and space that Cameron Awkward Rich has fostered for us. I'm really excited for the rest of Queer Week and what will emerge in and outside of the classroom. Speaking outside of the classroom, Cameron's forthcoming collection, In Optimism, will be out from Persia Books coming this fall. And keep your clapping because if you're able to, let's all join together in welcoming Cameron to the stage.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Yeah, I feel that I could keep going, but I'm not going to. I spent too long in the sun, and so if I try to banter, it will go weirdly. It's really great to be here with all of you. It's really great to be in the kind of motley creativity of Queer Week, yeah. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm really excited for this reading and to get to engage with Miriam's work again. I was going to do something different. So if you were here last year, I'm going to read kind of the same thing that I read last year. And if you weren't, then great. It'll seem new. But as a sort of professionally paranoid transsexual, I was a little bit alarmed by how just like plainly and purely sad the Skermeti decision made me. And I think that for that reason, I've been thinking even more than I am always already thinking about Polly Murray, who was a 20th century Black, probably trans, poet, priest, lawyer, etc., whose thinking really undergirds a lot of kind of anti-discrimination law presently, and who, I mean, I'll say this as a quip, and maybe if you care, you can ask me what I mean by it later, but was once almost the general counsel of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, but was not allowed to do this job that they were actually promised because 30 years before they had been found in Providence, Rhode Island in men's clothing. So I have this long essay poem thing in the new book that is directed to Polly, and so I'm going to read that to you. And then if there is more time, I'll read you two kind of normal length, normal poems. But this is more like an essay than a poem. It's called Palinode, and it comes with slides. Whoop. Two epigraphs. The proximities of the archive disperse the feeling of otherwise being consumed by the present and its many emergencies. Jules Gill Peterson. Reading only with and for transsexuals, I read for my life. J. Prosser. Palinode. Dear Polly, I've been trying to write about you for some years now and have not been able. Well, other people might say I have been. I've given talks. There's an essay under contract, but I haven't been able yet to say what I mean. Lately, each thing I do is a form of the epistolary, apostrophe, some particular impossible you. The problem is, of course, one of audience, address. I cannot have a single thought. From what I can tell, you didn't have that problem. You were, I think, able to hold something like a nation in your head. Still, it must have eventually driven you mad, from scene to scene, institution to institution, looking for felicitous language, the precise vocabulary, syntax for making clear what to you was always clear, that you were alive. Anyway, I've been having trouble lately. The sentences either do not come or lie flat or say only what is obvious to say. Life hangs beneath a question. Dear Polly, am I right to say that for you, the poet was at best a kind of prophet? Not a fortune teller, but in the biblical tradition, someone who could sense the future looming in the present, who issues the warning, if we do not change our course, we will be and thus are already doomed. Dear Polly, in interviews, you say that writing was what enabled you to bear your life beneath the question. It was what you did, that is, when no other action was possible, a little valve for when the pressure built. Anger otherwise would kill you. When asked at 67, at the edge of your fourth, fifth career, if you would ever let yourself rest, you said, in short, I'd be dead if I did. In the essay, the one under contract, the one I am already ashamed of, I make arguments, or try to. First, I argue that you understood yourself as somehow living in the future. Ahead of myself is how you put it once, 21 years ahead. Second, I argue that this is a trans way of occupying time, living out the future in the present tense, embodying for others, for yourselves, Ernst Bloch's not yet. It's easy to idealize, being imbued with the sheen of futurity, endless becoming, longing that propels us, etc. But it's terrible, you know. Or it is also terrible. People take up all kinds of postures toward the future. Hope is one. Dread, militarized fear. I write, if all goes well, to find out what I do not know. Dear Polly, before the war, you had been in love. Not just, that is, experiencing the feeling of love, but held inside of it. Held and then no longer held because love could not see you as you were, a man you tried for over a decade to become. Sex was a scene of your impossibility. People interpret this in all kinds of ways. False consciousness, schizophrenia, ego-dystonic lesbianism, transsexuality, the disease of reading, and sure, me too. In a prior scene, I am 13. I've just finished a novel, middle sex. I am crouching on the blue carpet in my blue room. I am straining to sense how I might too have secreted inside the capacity to change. Dear Polly, about you, it was once reported that your errands were carefully planned so that you could travel in a circle, not wasting time. In the essay, I argue that although by the late 1960s or so, you had fallen out of the future, taken up residence in the past present tense, come to feel history more and more as a series of closed loops, we can sense nonetheless in your poems, your photographs, your strained sentences, your trans life preserved in the aesthetic, your still latent futures given form. Dear Polly, in 2011, in California, I rode my bicycle for miles to the office of a doctor whose name I do not any longer know. He gave me what you, nearly a century ago, had wanted with a kind of fervor I can never muster. I'm not saying it was easy. There had been psychologists and letters and prior attempts and protracted conflict and years and furtive transit and paperwork and endless, deadening talk, but it was possible. Dear Polly, I encounter a thought that breaks a little more my heart. You say, finally, that race and sex are biologically permanent. You grow from a child to an adult, an alien may become a citizen, and so on, but where you have a permanent characteristic, it is on the basis of one's birth that one becomes a member of that caste. It is completely imposed upon one, and there is no way that one can escape. I don't know when this thought, the finality of it, seized you. Was it your admiration of Mary Daly, her writing, her beautiful tan? Was it that you could no longer bear hope's disappointment? Was it that you were, in some important way, already dead? All I know is that by the end of your life, having discovered no other way, you had become convinced that race, that sex, were closed forms. Polly, listen, they aren't. It isn't. Dear Polly, if you were alive now, I suspect I wouldn't so admire you. Lawyer, priest, National Organization of Women, acquainted with the president's wife. But because you are dead, I do. Of course, if you were alive now, you wouldn't be in every important way you. I spend my whole life trying to convince my students of this. Our categories have histories, I say, gesturing wildly with my little nub of chalk. There, at work, I use words like contingency, discursive formations, rupture, and yet, today, walking with F around our Massachusetts town, I insist, as always, on a circular route. Coffee, then groceries, then flowers, for its tender efficiency. Oh, Polly, how can I help it? The first, the beautiful thought. You. Dear Polly, I have been wasting time. Doom is, among other things, why I'm here, trying to speak to you. Dear Polly, I guess the truth is that I am not brave, do not want to be brave. I want my classes, my students, my domestic poems. I want to move in small circles. I want 20 minutes in the morning, the blue couch, the blue room. Dear Polly, across the country, Across the Senates and House chambers and governors' desks and Twitter feeds and liberal papers, some they is busy legislating sex, race, the people, the human, etc. as closed forms. They are busy, that is, making life impossible, always in the name of life. I can offer endless impersonal explanations, but I feel at first as numb hand, clenched thought, bird in the throat. What was it you said? Race is the atmosphere we breathe from day to day, the pervasive irritant, the chronic allergy, the vague apprehension that makes one uncomfortable, jumpy. Dear Polly, even now, I can't say what I mean. Dear Polly, I am writing to you because I cannot write. Everywhere there is language, enumerations of the problem, diagnoses the problem beginning as far back as I can imagine, farther still. In class, I pace with my chalk. I circle the room, the words, e.g. neoliberalism, biopolitics, coloniality, modernity, the nuclear family form, and so on. Draw desperate, crooked lines. I say and say and say, and what for? Increasingly, I think there is only one word that might matter. No. Dear Polly, the more I look at you, the more I am overcome with an eerie feeling, a visceral near identification that seems against my better judgment that it might rescue me. I've become frankly fixated on this image of you, you who were prolific amidst Jim Crow, the fascist American mid-century, the Great Depression, your endless dislocation in pursuit of meaningful work, the atmosphere of anti-Blackness, the deathly race-gender politics of the university, your loneliness, your unruly mind, the thwarting of your trans desires during a tipping point when sex change was heralded as newly possible, fixated on the question simply of how you thought under these conditions, how you endured the present tense. Dear Polly, no. No, 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 no. Dear Polly, I am standing before a crowd of people I admire, talking incoherently about you, my pursuit of you. What everyone will remember is that I am lonely, or that I have formal questions about loneliness, about whether it is a feeling that produces continuity, a desire for continuity where there might more ethically be rupture. All day, they come up to me to report that they like what I said about loneliness, which makes me suspicious. Am I lonely? Am I lonely? My days are crowded with other people. Dear Polly, I look for as long as I can stand at one particular image. You as young man, you as Pete, you as self-proclaimed vagabond in a leather coat. I go tender for this image. You are young, little brother, so young. This is before Bellevue and the rest home, before the arrests and the intake forms and your desperate lines, before you spread beneath the knife in search of hidden organs, before the first end of love, before you are refused and refused and refused and made, I can't help but think, into the bravest thing, Black girl, Black woman. Dear Polly, as far as I know, there is no tense, not in English, to describe the shape of time you help me see, the was will be, the salted circle, the still not yet. Dear Polly, your name for her, your first great love, was Pan, Pete and Pan, the boy who would not grow up, the boy who returns and returns to the same house, the same window, though nothing ever is the same. Polly, the truth is, after all this time, I want him simply to have lived. I think this means, shamefully, inconceivably, I want to live, to have lived. And though no word was uttered above the tumult of advancing tide, you came uncalled and placed your hand in mine. Thanks. Is it okay if I read maybe one more poem? Huh? Oh, that's Sam. We can ignore them. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to read one more. It will be short. I've only ever read well, it won't be short, but I've only ever read this one out loud to people one time. And I think it makes the same move, basically, as the poly essay, but instead of being a kind of ashamed renunciation of an essay I wrote, it's a kind of complaint about not wanting to mow my lawn. Yeah, I don't know how to read this one, so you're kind of my test subjects, yeah. It's called It Was the Best of Times, It Was the Worst of Times. When walls were raised, we swore we'd be a raft inside the whale that we were sovereign of. We sovereigns of, though everyone, yes, everyone was party to the angel of the pending storm. The rising storm, our little raft, our sprawling raft inside its eye where everything was calm. Oh, calm against the brackish wall, the bracing wall that was the world that was somehow ablaze with hyacinth. With hyacinth inside the whale, inside the walls, we lived our lives. We lived our lives of mowing grass, of shearing grass, despite the times, the children gone to future war, the future war of what we made, our money and our rage against the hyacinth, the children who were made to die in futures I could not abide, will not abide, I say, inside, I stay inside the whale and I, we cut the grass or fail to sow, we failed to, and our little plot of life a raft, our little plot grown wild, a facsimile of wildness, a wilderness conditioned by the boundaries of propriety, the lines drawn in the wilding grass, the leaves of grass divided from what's not by law, the whale, the kids, the hyacinth, oh violet fire, war of life against its end. Against its end we built a raft, we thought, and now we what? We watch, and now we wait, we hang up shelves, we paint our rooms, we dance around each other slow. We hear the news, we memorize the names we say or don't. Love, don't the lost already know what's rising, love? We rise, we pace, we make, we weather on inside the whale. I've got the story wrong, but love, I want so much, it's selfish, yes, it's selfish, but I hope we get to live like this. I hope it isn't how we die. Thanks.
Wow. I think a little more applause for Cameron Awkward-Rich. That's what you call finishing strong. And thanks to Kayla for that wonderful introduction. Thank you. I would like to invite one of Alex's students, who's also one of our all-star summer summer program assistants, Hannah Rivers, to the stage, who will introduce Alexander Chee.
Cameron, that was amazing. Hi, everyone. If we haven't already met, I'm Hannah, and I'm a program assistant here. I'm really honored to introduce the writer Alexander Chee tonight. Alexander Chee is the best-selling author of the novels Edinburgh and The Queen of the Night, and the essay collection How to Write an Autobiographical Novel, all from Mariner Books. A contributing editor at The New Republic and an editor-at-large at VQR, his essays and stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, T Magazine, the Sewanee Review, and the 2016 and 2019 Best American Essays. He was guest editor for the Best American Essays of 2022. He is a 2021 United States Artist Fellow, a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow in Nonfiction, and the recipient of a Whiting Award, an NEA Fellowship, an MCCA Fellowship, the Randy Schiltz Prize in Gay Nonfiction, the Paul Engel Prize, the Lambda Editor's Choice Prize, and residency fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, the VCCA, the Leydig House, Civitella, Ranieri, and Amtrak. He is a full professor of English and creative writing at Dartmouth College and lives in Vermont. I first heard about Alexander's work when I was interning at the Asian American Writers Workshop in 2018, and I first read his work the following summer, which was the summer before my senior year of college. This was also the summer that I was finally forced to come out to myself via a nauseatingly intense crush on a coworker. In other words, it was a summer in which I became much more deeply me. I read Alexander's essay collection, How to Write an Autobiographical Novel, during this time, and shortly after his novel, Edinburgh. Getting a sense of how he translated the raw material of lived experience into a compelling fictional narrative through time, dedication, imagination, craft, and the healing of trauma was transformative and made me feel utterly possible as a queer person, a mixed-race person, and as a writer. Alexander is a deeply thoughtful mentor, which I've come to understand through one-off emails over the years, online classes, and now in our workshop this week. In imparting his writing wisdom, he consistently gives credence to teachers of his own, continuing a powerful legacy of mentorship and generosity that I aspire to be a part of. I want to thank Falk also for the opportunity to take his class for free through my job here. I'm so grateful to David and Sharon and really the whole team for seeing me as the creative person that I am and letting me take time off from work to do things like take this workshop and go to New York for the Dyke March this weekend. It's been so special to be in Alexander's class, and I'm excited to hear him read from his queer campus novel in progress. So please join me in welcoming to the stage the inimitable Alexander Chee.
Thank you, Hannah. That was so moving. I really hope that this excerpt doesn't suck. Just kidding. Okay. So, thank you to Falk and all of its lovely community members, staff, and to Andrea, who I met in 1992. Yes, our friendship is older than many of you. Yes. I've been a little torn about what to read. I decided by this afternoon, and then I changed my mind on the way over. But I think that's just because I am ready to release the book pretty soon, and so I kind of just want the whole thing out. So I'm going to resist reading too much. Just going to put my little timepiece there. Okay. The novel is called Other People's Husbands. I've been calling it dark academia, but nobody dies yet. What do you need to know as I get into this? Oh, it's set in a fictional college in the Berkshires of Massachusetts called Sheffield College. And it's mostly because I didn't want to lose any friends. So, all right. I'm going to start us with where is this? Okay. Start us with actually, it's kind of self-explanatory. Okay. Only a few members of the faculty probably remembered directly what I'll call the inciting incident of my reputational scandal on campus as a student. Oh, he's teaching at his alma mater. Roger Lee is the narrator. My reputational scandal on campus as a student, enough to experience the irony of me returning as the visiting writer. Most of the irony was mine. The year was 1989, and it was summer, and I had graduated, but I was continuing on just for that July as an intern at the Sheffield Summer Writers Conference. I had gone with that year's outgoing visiting writer into the solarium of the English Philosophy Building for some of the bottles in the bar to take them out on the lawn so we could drink under the moonlight. It was a beautiful night, and the hill we called the Meadow was lit up. The faculty and the interns both had decided on a nightcap outdoors, though I had in fact suggested it, and he had volunteered to help me. He had hit on all of the other interns, all young women, before this, and each of them had turned him down one by one. I figured he was done for the evening and was coming back to the solarium with me for some male camaraderie I wasn't inclined to offer. I bent over the door handle to get a better look at the lock, and from behind me he said, "You know, in college I used to be gay." I paused, amazed. Was this really happening? It was. I finished turning the key and the door swung open. "What happened?" I asked as I held the door for him to walk through. "My boyfriend and I broke up," he said, "and then I met my wife, and he turned out to be my only boyfriend." We stood there in the dark for a moment, looking at each other. I realized he was probably hoping I might be one of those gays who would give him the blowjob he was looking for. And he was right, I was. I would have done it on principle, honestly. There was no chemistry between us that I could sense at the time. No history and no attraction. I had never taken his classes. He was 20 years older than me, a Pakistani-American novelist in his early middle age who had emigrated from Karachi a long time ago on an engineering scholarship and had worked in technology first before writing his first novel, The Engineer, beginning the career that had brought us to this room. Now he was award-winning, a little drunk, and it seemed a little horny. And he was looking at me like I was an actor waiting for his scene partner to remember his line. "What was he like?" I asked. "He was beautiful, brilliant. He works in Silicon Valley now. He's very wealthy. He's always posting photos of his boyfriend on his MySpace." I was waiting for more details, and then I thought, what the fuck am I doing? I was curious. "Sit down," I said. He sat down. I walked over to him, standing closer to him. I had never thought of his body before this, really. He was well kept, with a mustache and glasses he took off just then, folding them into his pocket. He reached out a hand for my belt, drawing me closer, and then he opened my pants, and I drew out my cock and waved it in the air above his face, watching him watch it. And then I let it fall into his mouth, flinching a little as the tender part hit his mustache. His technique was good, and it is its own thrill, sometimes, just to be wanted this way. My sexuality is that I have sex with people who want me, came the thought. A joke, or was it? I was going to bet I wasn't the first young man to find himself in this predicament. He brought me off quickly, and himself also, onto the solarium tile floor. As he cleaned himself and the floor, I walked over to the wet bar and grabbed the bottles we came for. "I can't be seen taking these out of the building," I said, "but you can. Shall we?" We set out with him, cradling the bottles like they were little trophies held against his chest, and we made our way back out to the meadow, where the other writers and interns greeted us as if nothing unusual had happened, cheering for us like heroes. He smiled at me, grateful, it seems, for some kind of victory over his circumstances. And then I spent the rest of the night on the other side of the lawn from him. By the time I left, I'd almost forgotten it had happened, but every now and then we would exchange a glance, and I would remember. The moment that came back to me over the years was that he had swallowed me, the first to do so. It was 1989. It wasn't considered safe, I knew, as the safer sex educator on campus. It would be considered safer, but not until later. I had tried to pull out a courtesy, but he held on until I was done. The next day, Nina Black, the director of creative writing and the conference both, summoned me to her office. Nina favored short skirts, mini dresses, statement jewelry, especially bracelets and bangles. She had excellent legs and wore heels that accentuated them, and she took her stairs at a run as if she were always training herself to wear them. In general, she carried herself with a mix of sophistication and enthusiasm, and could summon the impression that she was excited to be wherever she was. Her hair, worn down to her shoulders and wavy, dark and carefully colored as she got older, was part of this. She would sweep it from one side to the other of her head so that it fell and arranged itself. Or she would even, if she was playful, raise it like a curtain flap, peering out from underneath, as she did this morning. "Roger," she said, "Roger, where did all of that booze go? Did the writing faculty really drink all of that?" "They did," I said. We, of course, had helped, but that was not the question, really, and besides, from observation, I knew faculty drank about 3 times the amount students on the average. I had bought the alcohol for the solarium in town. "Well, we'll need to go to the liquor store again, though I'm tempted to start taking it out of their checks." I shrugged as if to agree. We, of course, meant me. She would not be going to the liquor store. And then she wheeled her office chair around dramatically, her hair flipping again. "Roger, also tell me truly, did that man really hit on all of the interns?" I knew from this that she'd spoken with at least a few of the other interns I worked with, and that she knew that I knew. And he had not been careful or discreet about his propositions. I nodded. "Yes, he did. He even sort of hit on me." So how to tell her? I sort of turned him down. I told her a story that omitted me letting him blow me there in the solarium in front of the alcohol, which I suspected might ruin our relationship, and watched as her eyes grew wider until the white was exposed entirely around her irises, a unique state of amazement. "Used to be gay," she shouted. "Used to be." "Used to be gay," I repeated. "My God. Well, thank you. You should tell me these things. If you ever wonder, does Nina want to know? Nina wants to know. Come to Nina. Don't save it for your memoirs." "Understood." "I mean, use it in your memoirs if you ever write them." "You're still not a writer?" I shook my head. It was sort of my thing as a student. I was working the conference but had no interest in the world of writing and publishing that I knew about then. I did think writers were funny. When Richard Bausch asked me to get him cigarettes and slipped me a $10 bill, I thought that was funny. When Robert Stone called me Sasha, because I looked like a Sasha, he said, I thought that was funny. When James Robeson gave me money to buy everybody drinks, and I slipped the money back to Mary Robeson on the sly, she thanked me with a wink. I thought that was not just funny, but beautiful. Nobody I'd ever known was like this in Florida. The adults I'd known prior to this had seemed more defeated than this. But the writers, they wore the same defeats more lightly, somehow, if at all. I had turned down unwanted male attention before, and I certainly didn't imagine this writer as a future mentor or someone I'd need a blurb from, any of those situations that might have made me feel, I don't know, more afraid. I neither felt pressured to have sex with him nor threatened in any way by what had passed between us. I'd let him blow me. I'd left something of me with him, a first time also, the startling feeling of being consumed. I was sure with the confidence of youth that I wouldn't see him again after this, but we were still in it, of course. The story of the evening became a story I'm sure the director told. And all the interns were, of course, telling it to their friends. Used to be gay became something of a toast that week. Used to be gay, we'd shout and clink our glasses together. We joked about making t-shirts to wear to his reading, but as interns, we all had too much to do, and that never came together. Funny stories travel faster probably than any other, and while I don't know what Nina Black told his wife or what she eventually heard, he left Sheffield soon after the conference, and his wife left him shortly after that. The day I returned to her office as the next visiting writer, 20 years later, she gestured again to her chair, just like old times. "Welcome back, Roger. It's so nice to see you. What a transformation time has wrought." She had a way of making my first name sound intimate, almost like she was calling me her son. "The one intern who said he wasn't going to be a writer, now a writer." We laughed at the boy I once was. "The visiting writer," I said. And as if on cue, she said, "He's at Yale now, Mr. Used to be Gay." She sighed and gestured at a chair for me to sit down. I did. "He was a thief, you know." With her, this meant she was about to tell me. The library had to eventually write to him and threaten to tell Yale they'd hired a thief because of photographs he hadn't returned. Photos he'd taken home for research, he said. He gave them back finally, but isn't that incredible? She didn't really need you to answer yes to that question. And he's remarried. She pointed a finger high in the air. To a woman. Still used to be gay. Well, good for him, I said. And we laughed more. Is it? I suppose so. I remembered that she and her husband had both gone to Yale, and this was perhaps part of why she knew this. What were those photos of? I asked. That's a very good question, Nina answered. I would love to know, but those librarians, they give away nothing, not even those photos. There was no way to fact check most of what she said, but it didn't really matter. She seemed to always be in it for the lines in this life. She had never published much that anyone ever knew, but she had remained director of creative writing for 30 years, and there was no sign she would give it up. I remember learning she was an adjunct, renewed annually. A kind of institutional paradox I would later learn was often associated with a patchwork CV of some kind, or some other strangeness in her career. In her case, despite being a formidable administrator and beloved teacher, she had alienated much of the faculty, as she told me, when she left her first husband, a tenured professor in government, for her second husband, a tenured professor in history. But no one wants to arrange things, you see, she told me with one of her hair tosses. Her beautiful hair tossed from one shoulder to the next. Except me. I love it. I love the arranging. And so they need me because they could not manage it without me. An artist administrator is like a cat who plays the violin and directs the symphony. They just do not exist. And when they need you and hate you, they hate you even more. She looked at me with her wide eyes, the lashes cinema perfect, and then shook her head. It's right that you've gotten this job, she said, and I'm so relieved to know I can trust you around the interns and the students. There's no solarium bar anymore, though. I made a pout. What a terrible luck, I said. Can we petition to bring it back? You can. I'm so happy you're back, I might bring it back just because you asked. Welcome back, Roger. I am thrilled. And with that, she pushed some keys toward me. The brass key is for the office. The one with the red fob is for the front door. If you lose them, we charge you $80 to replace them. That is out of my hands. My office already had my name on the door, Roger Lee, visiting writer. I noticed way up along the top of the door, there was an old red ribbon for AIDS awareness sticker from the 1990s, pasted there by someone after my time as a student and before this time, half rubbed away, but still there. I made a note to ask Nina about who that might have been and then turned the key and unlocked the door for the first time. It was a very solid metal institutional door, weighted and with a bar up top so that it would swing out shut on its own. The lights went on automatically, triggered by my entrance. The office itself was as big as the apartment I'd shared in Brooklyn with my ex, Colin, with high ceilings and bookshelves on each side that extended all the way to the window at the end, and which went up higher than I could reach. A step stool or ladder would be needed. An institutional gray-brown nub fabric carpeting that is easy to vacuum presumably covered the entire floor and looked to be clean. Near the window in the back was a long window with a view of the garden maze behind the building, and the geometries of the space were as pleasing as ever. It felt designed to please me. There was a blind to cut the harshest light of the sun. The walls were almost intimidatingly bare. I set up my computer, found my power outlets, arranged the desk and chair the way I wanted. The desk was an entirely lovely, simple modern wooden desk, almost forgettable. The chair was an Aeron, ergonomic. And I liked to stretch out on it like a large cat when I was alone, in positions I would never let anyone see. I couldn't call it yoga. I told myself it was all going to work out for me. I wasn't going to marry anyone. I wasn't going to get lost in the loneliness of a marriage to a man or a woman. I wasn't going to leave in disgrace. I made a note to ask the library for the photos somehow. Someone there had to know how to find out what they were. I wondered if Nina actually did know. What pictures could you want enough to get in that kind of trouble? I tried to remember if I'd ever been in this office. It was the office the visiting writers all had over the years, and the shelves were full of some books each of them had left behind. The titles were like a found poem about teaching creative writing. Pride and Prejudice, Mill on the Floss, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please, The Piano Teacher, Lucy, Two girls fat and thin, the street of the crocodiles, love medicine, under the net. But there was plenty of empty shelf space, and I wondered if I'd be here long enough to fill even one of them. I tried to imagine my visiting writer, we'll just call him the engineer, in this office. The loneliness that must have compelled him to take those kinds of risks was suddenly visible, palpable. The loneliness of his job, his marriage, maybe even his writing, of being someone who thought he used to be gay but still wanted a blowjob in the night with an intern who perhaps reminded him of who he used to be, or of the old boyfriend even. Was it only drunk nostalgia? So many ways to become someone's funny story. Something said in a moment of weakness was bad enough. Made into a punchline that people shouted and laughed about. Maybe even made into a t-shirt. We'd held off, not only because we thought it was too mean, because we thought it might read the wrong way, as homophobic. And maybe in some way it was, and we hadn't thought it through. What solidarity did we owe closeted men? That was something friends and I had argued about for decades. But also he had never said to me, tell no one. He hadn't tried to hide his loneliness, making it instead something of a campaign conducted intern by intern. And the thing about interns is, you have to know this, they are the future. They are the next writers, the next directors, the next stars, the next all of it. They're in it enough to work for low pay or no pay. That is a commitment most people didn't understand. Certainly the engineer didn't. But he had won a prize for the novel he completed here. A lot of them had. The job had a good track record. What were the photos he tried to leave with, I wondered again. Had he hung them on the walls? What had he really done in here? And was the office good luck or bad, indifferent? And then I heard the sound of a woman running in high heels down the stairs, the front door slamming shut behind her, the drumbeat of Nia's shoes drove all other thoughts away. The fear that I would become like him would return to me during my time there, of course. And each time I let it go, it felt like it was really gone. Stop there. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for Alexander Chee. Amazing. Thank you, Alex. And also thanks to Hannah for that really lovely introduction. And yes. Do you like our new gooseneck? It's pretty awesome, right? Remember last year where I had to adjust the mic 20 times a night at student night? Now it's easily maneuverable by anybody who's up here. Hi, that was easy. I'm tall. Oh, no problem. I'm short. Oh, that's no problem. Somebody stop me, please. Okay. Well, I don't have the heat as an excuse for my unintelligibility. Not that you're... I'm not... Okay, so here, finally, I'm delighted to introduce one of Miriam's students, Bella Thomas Wilson, who is going to introduce Miriam Klein Stahl. Hi, welcome.
Hello, friends. My name is Bella. I just saw some whales, and now I am here to introduce Miriam. Yeah, it's a great day. We were following 3 for a couple of hours. It was great. Okay, Miriam Klein Stahl is a diasporist, artist, educator, activist, and the New York Times-bestselling illustrator of Rad American Women, A through Z, and Rad Women Worldwide. As an artist, she follows in a tradition of making socially relevant work, hence the I Love DEI shirt that she was wearing this morning, creating portraits of political activists, misfits, radicals, and radical movements. In addition to her work in printmaking, drawing, sculpture, paper cut, and public art, She is the co-founder of the Arts and Humanities Academy at Berkeley High School, where she has taught since 1995. As an educator, she has dedicated her teaching practice to address equity through the lens of the arts. Her work has been widely exhibited and reproduced internationally. She lives in Berkeley, California, located on the ancestral lands of the Chochenyo people with her wife, the artist Lena Wolff, their daughter, and poodle. Miriam's work offers us a space to reflect on those who have been integral to our lived experiences. I was drawn to Miriam's course titled Printing Our Queer and Trans Lineage for several reasons. I admire the emphasis she places on documenting and caring for our queer and trans family, especially in the face of triad erasure. Miriam uses a multiplicity of approaches within portraiture and creates innovative ways to capture history and narrative within them. During the orientation for our workshop, her first words were, "We're going to jump in and start tomorrow." She has reminded us not to overthink the details every hour or so since then. It's such a gift to have an inspiring and an easygoing teacher to look to when you cut a little too far into your lino block. Thank you, Miriam, for keeping a running archive of our queer heroes and loved ones. Please welcome to the stage Miriam Klein Stahl.
Thank you, Bella. That was lovely. Just going to set my timer here. Okay. So during sheltering in place, in the deep COVID times, I was doing these little zines to send to friends and family called quaranzines. And I also bought one of these sock dancers that like your local tax person has to stir up business. And I thought it would be a really good idea to put it in front of my house and cheer people up. But my wife and daughter were completely horrified. So I put it in our backyard, and just me and my sock would dance around. And well, I just remembered this last night as the wonderful artist Kathy Opie was showing these monuments that had fallen during that same time. Kathy Opie was driving around in a motorhome with like an amazing camera and her incredible way to picture things, and documenting these statues in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was in my yard with my sock and drawing the fallen statues. So that's Columbus that was pulled down. I think it was one of the first ones that was yanked to the ground. So that wasn't really part of my slideshow, but I was remembering it when Kathy was presenting last night. I was born in Los Angeles, California, Gardena to be specific, and right near here. And I developed asthma. This was my first book that I ever had, and I used to ride my bike around to garage sales, and I got this for a nickel. And this is now one of my favorite artists, Lynn Ward, and I still have this book. And what I loved about it is it was all images and no words. And I didn't find out till way later on I'm dyslexic too, Kathy. And so this book just totally made sense to me, and it's very deep for a 10-year-old to get this book. It's about a guy who sells his soul to the devil to become a famous artist, and then it happens. He gets really rich and famous, and then he realizes, I'm really lonely, and I wish I could just like have community and family. So early inspiration from when I was 10. Another early queer root. And that's another one from my teen years. That's Sesame Street, in case you don't know. Bert and Ernie, first gay couple I knew of. And then when I was a teenager, I found this comic book called Love and Rockets, and it was like the first lesbian couple I knew about, and it's Maggie and Hopi, and they were like these cool Latinx punks from Oxnard, California, fictional, but I thought I knew them and I loved them and I wanted to know them and I wanted them to be my friends. Aren't they cool? And then I also became a punk rocker in Los Angeles, and this was another big inspiration on me was the logos, and I saw that as a way I could contribute to punk culture with art, and so these are some that I was inspired by and some bands I loved. This was one of the first portraits I made of my mom, and my style's not changed since. I made this in about 1985. And that skateboarding also had a really big influence on me. That's me skating as a teen off a truck. And I was in Los Angeles. Thanks. I was in Los Angeles, and I would order zines in the mail. And I got Homocore, which came out of San Francisco, and also Comet Bus. I became pen pals with people from both these zines, and they encouraged me to move to San Francisco because I was like a queer punk kid in Los Angeles, and I thought that I would never find a girlfriend. I'll never meet another queer punk. And then I moved to San Francisco in 1988, and it was like a time when you could get these magazines, but then you like were just friends with the people that made them, which was amazing. And so I went there and found community immediately. I worked at a place called Epicenter Zone, and I was like making flyers for them. That's one of them on the left. And it was a punk rock community center record store with info shop and a free library, and I worked the switchboard there. This was before the internet, or when the internet first started, and so I would, people would call and say, where can I find housing or food or healthcare, and we'd have like a notebook that I'd look stuff up and like tell them. And I just want to say I was very inspired by Celeste last night. Is Celeste here? No, but and the Trevor Project, serving a similar purpose in being, a hotline for queer youth to call and get resources they need, suicide hotline. And so tonight I have prints on the back table if you passed them, and they're all for sale for a donation to the Trevor Project. Playing forward my punk roots here. This is the bearded lady. I thought maybe Harry would be here. He was here last night, and this was a cafe he owned with some other people, and people in the room that lived in San Francisco at the time are like, we fucking love the bearded lady. It was our FOC, really, but you could go every day. I also, when I got to San Francisco, outside of a bookstore that Alex worked at, it was like my first day I went there, 1988, and Queer Nation and ACT UP were staging a protest on the street, on Castro Street. All these people laid down like they were dead, and then someone would come and draw chalk around them, and they had these signs, and I thought, I got to be part of that, because this is like activism and art coming together in a way I totally understand and that I give a shit about. And so ACT UP was a really huge influence on my art as well. That's Frida Kahlo there, and San Francisco was the first place to have a Frida Kahlo exhibition, and another big influence on my printmaking was the Latin American artist that I knew in the Mission District of San Francisco that brought her work to the city. And that's a photo by Chloe Sherman of a young me. And seeing this Frida Kahlo photo at that time in the 80s made me really recognize my gender, which is a spork, not a fork, not a spoon, but a woman that likes to wear men's clothing. I also met Emory Douglas when I first moved to the city, who is the artist, the minister of culture for the Black Panther Party. This is his garage with some of his work. And what he said something to me that has stuck with me all these years is that he's a movement artist, and he wouldn't make work. He just wouldn't make artwork, but he does because he needs to, and he has a calling to. And that's not totally me. I'm just going to make stuff every day no matter what, but something about that, the way that he worked, and has also been a massive inspiration. Okay, my work. So these are all some linoleum cuts that I've made of some queer heroes. And these were all made like in the 80s and 90s. That's that's my favorite beetle. That's Amy Goodman. And then I started making paper cuts, and this is a book series that I worked on in the 2000s. And the one, Rad American Women A through Z, was the first book, and I've taught public school for 30 years. And around that time, thank you. Around that time, a lot of my students were talking about sexual harm being perpetrated upon them. And I had a young daughter at the time, and I just felt like our young men could do way better than they're doing. And so I talked to a friend of mine that's a writer, and we collaborated on this book, Rad American Women A through Z, with this idea to address what I was seeing in my classroom every day of young men just really not respecting the women that were in the class. And I knew that they weren't always like that, and I knew that they all loved women in their life. And there was no books like this at the time, but now there's like hundreds of them, and we actually made a trend in publishing because that book became a bestseller, and we just thought, you know, like Bay Area moms are going to love it. But it was like people loved it all over, and there's like 200,000 of them out in the world now. And I also, the thing I love about books also is they're under $20, or they're free from the library. And so that's a way like people could have 26 images of mine for free or for, you know, under $20. So I love making books. This series is done now, but they're in the back. So the first book, I was making paper cuts and then designing it on the computer and dropping color in. And I didn't know this, that when you have a book deal that they have book designers. I thought the illustrator was supposed to design the book. So me and Kate's, who the writer was, her partner, we designed the whole book. And then when we got moved to the second book, they're like, we have an in-house designer, and you can just hand us your art. So then I did paper cuts for the backgrounds and the foregrounds because I didn't have to figure it out. And then for the last book we did, I was so tired of doing paper cuts because people expect it now, like I have to, and I just wanted to do watercolor. So I compromised with them and did watercolor and paper cut together. And this book is my favorite, and it came out when we were sheltering in place, so it didn't really have much of a life, but it's I really wanted to move away from just focusing on individual people and think about movements. So this is Rad American History A through Z, and so B is for Black Lives Matter, Q is for quilts, that's the AIDS memorial quilt. And that book's back there. And I think that book is really good for this time in history right now that we're in, to look at how groups of people can make change together. This is an exhibition I had that was supposed to open in 2020 that was postponed. And it was at the Oakland Museum called Hella Feminist. And I got to make portraits of 200 East Bay feminists. And we interviewed people that were alive or talked to scholars for people that weren't alive. And they were people that we knew, people we didn't know from the last 200 years. And there was, I have a pointer. This was, you could hold to your ear and hear interviews with people. And what we interviewed people was about the world of work, what is their work. And I also made these jumpsuits with a local seamstress that the workers at the museum wore around. So I loved the idea of these portraits walking around the museum. Yeah, Lena's on there somewhere. And then these are words from the interviews that I hand cut out, and that's the cover. This is the cover of the zine. We made 10,000 zines that were given away at the Oakland Museum as part of the show. This is the inside of the zine, so it had the 200 women and non-binary people in it with a quote from their interviews or a quote about them if they are no longer living. And then one thing, this is my friend Kamau at the show, one thing I loved about it when I would go visit it is seeing people he's that's my friend Faviana on the wall. Because it was 200 people, so many people that visited the museum would see someone they knew and be so excited. And so every time we went, right, Lena, we'd see people get up near here and take a picture. So I loved that. That was amazing. And this is one other thing that happened that I loved. This is Erica Huggins, a legendary Black Panther and educator in the Bay Area. And when I was carrying my big case of 200 paper cuts to the museum, I saw her across the street. And I yelled across the street, "Erica Huggins, I have a portrait of you in this box." And so she came over, and well, that's Erica Huggins with her younger self. Isn't that cool? Yeah, that was amazing. Lots of amazing things happen at that show. Yeah, that's just kind of how they look on the wall. They're just pinned up with those insect pins. Here's another exhibition with Karina in the house. Well, Lena, my wife, had a chorus, a radical chorus. And this was at one of my shows at SF State. And this is just kind of how I'm configuring them when I have shows. Making shapes. Here's some poster series I did called Celebrate People's History, and I think you mentioned that to your students. A fellow named Josh McPhee, who lives in Brooklyn, has a place called the Interference Archive, which is amazing to visit. Oh, I'm out of time. See you later. Okay, I'll go through really quick. Okay, here's some posters. This is a poster we did for when the fascist white supremacists kept coming to Berkeley because they wanted to make a statement, because it's the home of free speech, that they can spew their hate there. The mayor of Berkeley asked my wife and I to make a response that people could put in their windows. So we worked with a former student of mine to design this poster. And Lena says there's probably 200,000 of them were printed by cities all around that were having a similar problem. And you still see them in windows all over the Bay Area. There was, Oakland, Stands United, and all the different cities made their own version. And that's me and Lena fighting fascists. Just some more prints here. R.I.P. Gary Floyd. I'm a teacher. I do free work for my union. This is a piece I got in a lot of trouble for. So in my 31 years of teaching, students that I had, a group of Jewish students actually, including my daughter, came to me and said, after October 7th, our teachers aren't talking about this. We don't know anything about Israel, Palestine, and we want to learn. And teachers weren't allowed to mention it. Berkeley, California. And so I helped students make these, and they screen printed them, and everyone was wearing these t-shirts, Teach Palestine. And then the Middle East Children's Alliance sells them now. If you want one for your very own, you could be like Angela Davis and have one. But I got in a lot of trouble for doing that, and I have an open claim by the ADL against me that I had to meet with lawyers. And this parent that I've never taught their kids filed the claim that I was anti-Semitic, which is funny for anyone that knows me. And I know there's a lot of academics in the room dealing with some similar censorship at your schools. Yeah, another needed image I made with students. Another needed image. This one on the right I made in the first Trump presidency, and we brought these to ICE detention centers, and then this current one I just printed 1,000 of, and we're given out at the No King's Day, and there's some on the back table for free if you want to put them in your community. Stop ICE. Here's some public art. I think I'm going too long, so maybe I just won't talk about it. I'll just flip through. And this is my most current thing. That's a architectural drawing of a public art piece, and it's really big. It's across the street from the Rosie the Riveter Museum in Richmond, California, where a lot of Rosies worked. And this was last week. Me and Lena went by to see if it was done, but it's not. I do book covers if there's any authors in the house. This was a show at SF MoMA about skateboarding. That's me, the Lexington Club, SF people. This is a skateboard that I made here, and where it says you, Morrissey used to be there, but he's such a dick that that I scraped him out, because he's like a white supremacist now, like Britain for white people only, and so I scraped him out and put you, because that would be embarrassing to have him on there. There's me skateboarding. That's a photo by Ace Morgan, a great SF photographer that you should know about. And this is another exhibit that was just up, and I'll end on that piece.
Inspiring. Can we have some more applause for Miriam Klein Stahl? Talk about good trouble. This sets an example for all of us. Can we please have, oh good, everybody's great. So we're going to do Q&A, and I'm going to give them microphones. If you could just wait, if you have a question, just wait for Miracle to get to you with a mic, because we're live streaming the events and we want people viewing at home to be able to hear your questions. So,
is this on? Yep.
Put up. Yeah.
Okay, see you later.
Also have comments or concerns.
I have a question for Cameron. There was something that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that you asked us to maybe have you elaborate on, and if you could elaborate upon that thing, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't. Yes, it's true. Sometimes a person leaves a little breadcrumb because they want to go on a speech, but I don't actually have a speech. I just couldn't figure out how in the moment to actually tell the story about Pauli Murray almost being general counsel for the EEOC and then not. I think that my little quip was like they were promised this job and then didn't get it because they had been found 30 years ago dressed quote unquote like a man. But actually what it was is that it was the summer of 1967. There were a bunch of racial uprisings that summer. They had been promised this job, but then the political climate made it such that folks in the White House didn't want them to have it. There was a whole FBI report about them, as there were of so many activists at the time, that you can read on the Internet Archive if you're interested. And the guy who basically had promised them this job was like, oh no, like how, given that they are an upstanding person and all of their references are like, this person is great and loves America more than anybody, how am I going to sort of deny them the job? And he did it ultimately on 4 bases. One, as like when they were like 20, they had worked for communist organizations. 2, they had a marriage that they had never consummated. 3, they had once been found wandering in Providence, Rhode Island, wearing men's clothing, and subsequently was in Bellevue for 2 days, where they were diagnosed as schizophrenic because they wanted hormones. And 4, oh, I don't remember the 4, but anyway, I think that I've just been sort of thinking a lot about Pauli Murray as like a particular kind of queer trans brilliance that undergirds so much of the like, so much of our kind of ability to be in this room today, but whose like life as it was happening was like constantly being thwarted by X, Y, or Z. Yeah. So that's all. I just couldn't figure out how to tell the whole story in a short way. Does that make sense? Have I made sense? Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Hi, my question is for all of you. It's just, what is giving you hope right now?
Queer Week. You know, I think something that I am not sure is entirely legible is how recent it is that we've been able to have the kinds of intergenerational conversations that we have here. And to, you know, talk about these kinds of histories, make work about them, think about them. And so being here this week, it's especially precious to me. I think of like, you know, when the Nazis destroyed Dr. Magnuson's library, you know, and how before that happened, there was a kind of flowering of queer thinking and thought that they were trying to suppress. And I've feared my whole life a return of that kind of moment, and I feel like that's what they want. So that's what we have to deny them. And part of that is about being together, making work.
Yeah, similarly, being in community and finding your people and making stuff together, and also just love, like giving and receiving love. Simple but hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm a person who is like in my work and well, also in my person, tuned kind of most obviously to the bad feelings. And so I think that people often ask me questions like, how do you balance, how do you find the balance between something like kind of being fixated on kind of the brutality and hope. And actually, and so this isn't going to answer the concrete question of what is giving you hope, but I think that I've been thinking about, I think that I've been trying to think about what I think hope actually is, because I think that my work, I think that I'm constantly making jokes that people are taking seriously. I think that though I am sort of tuned to what are the bad feelings, it's always like in order to move myself in another direction. And so I think that like I've been trying to think about hope as not like a feeling, not like a feel-good feeling, but instead as a capacity that a person can train, and specifically the capacity to think forward, right? To just sort of do the opposite of remembering, but actually like imagine to think forward, and that you can do that with any kind of feeling in mind. I think that it's just like sort of the important thing is to train yourself to be like, there is tomorrow and it will be different, and I can't say how, and that's good. It's good to not be able to say in advance what will happen. So I think, yes, I'm full of the feeling of doom, but also doom is a future-oriented feeling, and like it's also just like a feeling. I can't actually know that because I feel full of doom that's what's going to happen, So I think I'm just trying to like say something which is not fully formed about hope as being, people say this thing all the time, hope is a practice, hope is X, Y, or Z, but also like specifically one that doesn't require us to like feel good, Yeah.
Hi, I have a question for Alexander. I really loved the way that the excerpt and your reading of it navigated between being extremely, extremely funny, but also so intimate and soft and so many various points. And I was thinking to something you said at the beginning of your talk, which was that it was a dark academia book, but no one dies in it, at least not yet. It got me thinking about genre, and I was curious how the experience of working in that genre, or in genre in general, how that felt for you. Did it make it easier or harder to navigate and to access some of those emotional registers?
That's interesting. I think, I guess maybe, in the sense that like you get to play within a legacy of a kind, which I have done before in a way with my second novel, The Queen of the Night. But in doing that, you also start to unearth, right, something that becomes peculiar to you. I think, the book came about because I wrote something in 2008, sent it to myself, like the genius that I thought I was being on Gmail, like as an attachment, as a way of saving it. And of course had no memory of doing that eventually. And, flash forward to like 2023, and I was looking for a totally different file. And I was like, oh my God, what did I call other people's husbands? So I like clicked on it, and then I was like, and then I was like, oh my God, I love this. What have I done? So I just started working on it again, and I remembered that I had tried to pitch it as a TV show at one point, because I was so disgusted by all of these shows that it seemed to me never really got academia right. And even had a meeting with someone in LA, Jennifer Levine at Untitled Entertainment, who is like just a amazing person. And it was one of the best meetings I ever had with someone. And she said, this is a story about meeting someone who is like you were. And what do you do? What do you do when you meet the person who is like you, but you're 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And then, of course, blocked it out. But then found the email, that email also, and was like, oh my God, she's right. So I think a lot of my creative process, I'm teaching this kind of class on resurrections this week. But really, I think what I do with work is that I write it and then I abandon it. And then if it survives a long abandonment and I find it again, then I finish it.
Are there any libraries or archivists that can help Alex with his files?
I don't think so. But anyway, thank you. I don't know if that was an answer, but yeah, sure.
Is this on? Okay, cool. I also had a question for you, Alex, because you said that you were one of the only interns that didn't write, and now you're here.
Oh, it's not a memoir. It's a novel.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
But thank you. It's its own kind of compliment to think that the novel is a memoir. But
okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a question about this character then. How did they end up getting into writing?
How does the character end up getting into writing?
Yeah.
It's a part of the novel. He goes to Berlin accidentally for the reunification ceremony, which is something that did happen to me. Falls in love with these queer punks in East Berlin and stays, and then writes a novel about it. That becomes his first novel. And so I was trying to write about a kind of person who, when he takes the job, his boyfriend is like, why are you going back to the school you never even talk about the school? Who are you? And so I'm trying to talk about these kinds of transformations that can occur in a life that are unexpected, but I think I'm also playing off.
Because life is like that, isn't it?
Because life is like that, yeah. I think the playfulness. I definitely want to know how you, for example, came across polyamory. That's what I'm wondering. Is and
Sure, I can answer that. I think that I had known vaguely about them for longer than this, but the way that I became obsessed with them was also an email that I received and forgot about. There's a really great documentary about poly that came out during the pandemic, maybe, or a year after, 2020, 2021. And the directors had emailed me maybe during my first year at UMass during 2017, being we would like to have a classroom scene in this documentary. Do you ever teach Polly Murray's work? And I was like, I know that name, but I have no idea why you would think I, Cameron Awkward-Rich, would teach Polly Murray's work. Because at the time I knew them only as a lawyer. I didn't know that they were a poet. But then during sort of the beginning of the pandemic, while you were in your backyard with your sort of dancing, I sort of did that thing that happens to everybody, which is I turned 30 and I started looking around for dads. And that brought me back to the email about Polly Murray, and I was like, okay, why do these people think that Polly is my father? And I figured it out. Yeah.
I love that.
It's a question for Miriam. I love that you are a skateboarder. And did that bring you to queer community?
No.
What community did it bring you to?
Well, like I said, I was in Los Angeles, and I was like deeply into skateboarding. I had a sponsor, and it was like a big part of my life. But I needed the queer punks in San Francisco, and I left skateboarding until I had a daughter who's like, I want to try skateboarding, and so I started skateboarding again, and then this pro skater called Brian Anderson came out as queer, and he's like one of the best skaters out there right now, and it caused big ripples in the skate community, and you heard like a lot of support, but there was also like some homophobia brewing at skate parks. So my friend Tara Jepson, who's a writer and a comedian, was also, she started skateboarding in her 40s, and so me and her decided to make a skateboarding company and make our own decks with my art, and we put a manifesto on it, and I thought it'd be really funny to put just all these queers. So there's like, on that deck, it was like, you know, Audre Lorde rolling around a skateboard park. I just thought was great, you know. And so we made the skateboarding company, and then this whole like queer skate community started to happen, and Lena and I are friends with these guys, Jeff and Gabe, who curated that show at the SF MoMA called Unity in Skateboarding. That's all about queer skateboarding. That was in, you know, a big modern art museum. Queer skateboarders, amazing. Like my teenage self could not imagine that, because I was the only girl I knew that skateboarded. Like I didn't know, you know. But now skateboarding is just like so inclusive and amazing.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Hi. My question is about kind of ideas, favorite ways of engaging with the archive, as well as any kind of like recommendations for just kind of creatively going into some kind of dusty places. Like it's not a place I dream of, like the kind of like deep recesses of the library, but I know that's not the only way to engage with the archive too. So kind of curious about that. Obviously Miriam and Cameron, your work really spoke to that kind of engagement. And then Alex, you're welcome to take that question too. But I also was really interested in what you shared. It's not ancestors, but there is this sense of the protagonist being so closely aware of what he's stepping into, even being in the same room as the person who filled the role before him. And so in this troublesome way, which I think is true for you, Cameron, too, and at least in sort of the troubling arrangement of it, not just as like inspiration. So just those are some of my questions.
Well, I love storytelling, and I love the stories that aren't always told, and so I don't want to know the story that everyone knows. I want to know the one that we don't know. So I love archive for that, and also just kind of these oral histories. And being a listener, and I'm not one. I don't have many words in me, but I like to make pictures. Last year, I was so inspired by Cameron's slideshow that you saw that I made a paper cut of Polly to give to Cameron, so I like to listen and read and then respond visually.
Yeah, I love that paper cut. It's hanging in my office, and I think on the wall facing it, there's Octavia Butler. So it's like Octavia and Polly just looking at each other. Unfortunately, I do dream about the dusty recesses of the library. I love it there. I feel that I don't have anything necessarily to say about like how one ought to engage the archive or how I do. But I'll say that the reason that I love the dusty recesses of the library, and the reason that I love especially going through the papers of people like Polly, and also I've been doing work on / with a much more peculiar character named Red Jordan Roboto, who was also like very differently, like was a very different kind of character, but also like Polly kind of understood himself as like a prophet, and also understood himself as like a historical actor, and so his archives are very robust and very bizarre and full of ephemera. Anyway, the reason that I like working in archives, especially of people who understand themselves while they're alive as being historical actors, is that like there's just all kinds of weird stuff in there. And what I hate more than anything is the way that folks like Polly enter into our conversations as like icons in a way that doesn't allow them to be people, you know, that doesn't allow, you know, Polly's story about their gender to also basically just be a story about being heartbroken over and over again, you know? Like this thing that I keep mentioning about being picked up in Rhode Island, like the speculation is that they had just gotten their heart broken, and so they were wandering around just sort of, you know, anyway, so I think that I like archives like this because they allow me to see the mess of minoritarian life, right? They allow me to understand people who circulate as icons, or who people want to sort of make into icons as just like, you know, just like people who have weird folders full of like printouts of pigeons, you know what I mean? I don't know. So that's I think the thing about the dusty recesses of the library, is that there's all kinds of stuff there, and you just kind of have to be open to that, the idea that you'll find, like, you'll never find what you're looking for, but you will find something that It's in your email. Oh yeah, it's in your email what you're looking for.
Most likely, yeah. Keyword searches matter.
Yeah.
You know, I think I was telling my students today about some archival experiences that I've had, like writing about Dennis Johnson, going to the Ransom Center in Austin, looking through his papers, finding things like the Hallmark contest poem that he sent in and when he won as a teenager, or like checks that he wrote his parents to like pay them back for money that he'd borrowed, or letters that he wrote to his parents on the back of the mimeographs of poems of his classmates at the writer's workshop. So there's like, you know, a CD write draft on the back of like a letter to his mom and dad. And how there's a story, complicated story in all of that, right, that you can find. And that I remember I found like all of these introductions that people gave him at readings, and he hadn't written on them who introduced him, because presumably he would know, right? They were like his own, he was keeping them for himself. And so that was really moving to me, to find like all of those kinds of things. And I remember like one of my first experiences with an archive was when I was writing about the gay writer Gordon Merrick, who was he wrote these, in the industry they were called shop and fuck novels, but like usually gay guys didn't write them. So like, you know, there was always like this beautiful young man who was like figuring out his sexuality, which involved, of course, having sex with a lot of different people, and always in like beautiful landscapes, usually in yachts, and or like in cafes in Paris, or, you know, ateliers in Paris also. And he had been a spy during World War II, infiltrated the Vichy in France. And I found a box that was just his passports over his whole life. And it was amazing to see, with no explanation, all of the American passports, and then briefly the French one, you know, when he was undercover. So sometimes there's like moments like that that are really powerful that you have with some of the things that they've left behind. You know, he had a scrapbook for his first books, and then he published, I think, 13 in the course of his life, and he kept a scrapbook for like the first 5. And then I was like, oh, I get it. At a certain point, you just don't. You're like, okay, enough. So that, yeah, I think archives are like, God bless the special collections librarians. Truly. Right? Like, but they're also how you learn about when you're stepping into a possibly troubled legacy, you know. And I've always been very interested in what I call like the accidental archive, that someone didn't mean to create, you know. Like what you find in an office that everybody has used, you know, and no one ever bothers to like really clean out, you know. So anyway.
All right, let's give a big round of applause for Miriam Klein Stahl, Alexander Chee, and Cameron Awkward Rich.
Thank you.
Remember, books